The New York Times Co. versus United States, also known as the Pentagon Papers case. In 1967, Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, initiated a top-secret investigation on the U.S.'s involvement in Vietnam. This project was made up of 47 volumes at its completion and was labeled as classified, with only 15 copies ever produced.
Name has now come out as the possible source of the Times Pentagon documents. It is that of Daniel Ellsberg, the top policy analyst for the Defense and State Department.
I am prepared to answer to all the consequences of these decisions.
Daniel Ellsberg had worked on the project. He secretly made copies of the documents and sent them to Neil Sheehan at the New York Times.
Daniel Ellsberg has been known as the man who exposed the U.S. government's secrets about the Vietnam War.
I did this clearly at my own jeopardy.
On June 13, 1971, the New York Times began publishing the documents, calling them the Pentagon Papers.
In October of 1969, concerned that the public was being lied to, he began photocopying the report. He leaked some documents to members of Congress, but none of them went public. So in 1970, Ellsberg leaked portions to the New York Times and the Washington Post.
3 installments were published. Then the Nixon administration got a restraining order citing Section 793 of the Espionage Act. This dealt with prior restraint, government action that prohibits speech or other expression before the speech happens.
After the Second Circuit Court of Appeals confirmed the order, New York Times sent an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court. This case also included the Washington Post, who were also sent the documents but had the restraining order rejected. The case began on June 25th and the court's decision was issued on June 30th. The U.S. Attorney General argued that national security was far more important than protection under the First Amendments, especially freedom of speech and freedom of press. The justices voted 6-3 in favor of New York Times and Washington Post. They decided that freedom of the press was important to expose corruption, and that unless it could be proved that the leaked documents posed grave and irreparable danger to the nation and the people, the press would not be held accountable. This was a landmark decision emphasizing the freedom of the press.